The purpose of the Patriot Tour is to try to start a groundswell in the American people to demand a government, as Matt said, that follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. Now that sounds very simple and almost trivial, but think what a difference it would make if we actually had such a government. Of course, no more undeclared wars of aggression. No more energy policies written by the Enrons and Exxon Mobils. No more drug plans written by the pharmaceutical manufacturers and the insurance companies. Most importantly, I guess, no more sending our sons and daughters around the world to kill Arabs for the oil companies. And of course, no more spying on Americans, no more warrantless wiretaps, no more violations of our Constitution. No more false flags. No more lying to the American people to get us to do what they think we ought to do. No more gulfs of Tom Kim to get us into the Vietnam War. So it would be a huge change. And it's a change that is wanted and needed by people all across the political spectrum. One thing I learned when I ran for president in 2000 is that the American people, right, left, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, basically they all want the same thing. They want an honest government that serves their needs. They love their country, but fear their government, and for good reason. And so I am on a bit of a, what do I call it, a quest to bring together people from all parts of the political spectrum. My tour is being co-sponsored by Republicans from the 9/11 Truth Movement, Democrats from the peace groups, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the labor unions, the churches. In Houston, my talk was co-sponsored by the Texas militia. These folks have the same wants and needs as the rest of us. We in this country have been artificially divided by the wealthy elite who run things. They have given us two political parties and tried to make them appear as different as possible so that we would have the illusion that we have a choice. We still have a democracy. So they've sat back and figured out, well, let's have those guys be for abortion, those guys be against it. They can be for school prayer, and they'll be against it. Gun control, that's another good one. Oh, gay rights. Can't forget gay rights. The thing about all these hot-button issues that they try to divide us over is that they don't care how it comes out on those issues. It doesn't affect their bottom line. But on the issues that matter to them, going to war to secure an oil pipeline or cheap labor or something else, the two parties are as one. When it comes to trade, globalization, two parties are identical Remember, it was Al Gore who was so marvelous on global warming. It was Al Gore who was the hatchet man that got NAFTA through Congress and who essentially destroyed Ross Perot on the Larry King Show on NAFTA. So we're in a situation where we need to come together. The old leftist peace movement can't succeed on its own. My friends up in Idaho in the militia, as hard as they try, they're not going to succeed on their own. We all need to come together, recognize our common needs and goals, and take back America for all people. Now, once we've done that, we can have time to have a civil debate over the best approaches to the specific problems. And the Greens and Libertarians who co-hosted me in Tulsa may differ on some of the specifics. We'll work that out once we have a government that at least wants to serve the people and puts the people above the needs of the wealthy elite and the multinational corporations. So that's what this Patriot Tour is all about. Now, I had hoped to be able to address you tonight as Congressman Bob Bowman. I ran for Congress in the 15th Congressional District of Florida. I won my primary against a middle-of-the-road establishment Democrat named John Kennedy. And I went up against a 7-term Republican incumbent with all the money he ever could dream of at his disposal, from the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies in particular. He also had at his disposal, of course, the deep old touchscreen voting machines. And I wound up a little bit short, at 44% of the vote, according to the official tally. Some unofficial estimates say I probably got 58% of the vote. We will never know. I didn't have the money to do polling. But we are working very hard on getting conditions different for whoever tries it next. It may be me, it may be somebody else. And I don't particularly care. I am committed to running again. And this tour has nothing to do with any race for office. But I decided that since I can't address you as Congressman Bob Bowman, I will address you as President Bob Bowman. I'm going to give you my State of the Union address, and I ask you to pretend that I am doing this shortly after my inauguration, sometime later this year. And your role is members of Congress, Supreme Court, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and various sort of dignitaries. Your job, therefore, is, as usual, to clap and cheer like crazy when you hear something you agree with, and sit on your hands when you don't. Now, seated above and behind me are the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, who of course is the Vice President of the United States. Madam Speaker, Madam President, distinguished members of Congress, honored guests, and my fellow Americans. We are the greatest and most blessed nation on earth. We have a bounteous and beautiful land, a creative and skillful workforce, and an inspired Constitution. After World War II, we developed a growing middle class in which workers could support their families with one job, working 40 hours a week. 60 years later, the United States is unquestionably number one in the industrialized world. Number one in our use of the world's resources. Number one in the production of pollution. Number one in the gap between the rich and the poor. Number one in deaths by gunfire. Number one in teen pregnancy. Number one in poverty among the elderly. Number one in citizens without health coverage. Number one in child poverty. Number one in homeless veterans. And number one in citizens behind bars. And all that was true before W came in and made things even worse. Today we are again, as we were under his father, the world's number one debtor nation. Number one in the creation of new billionaires. Number one in school dropouts. Number one in poverty, homelessness, hunger, divorce, suicide, and, oh yes, number one in military force, nuclear weapons, and military spending, as much as all the other nations in the world combined. This also makes us the number one object of fear and hatred, and therefore the number one target of terrorists, along with our friends in Israel. We also lead the world in the number of hours worked per family, since it now takes 2 wage earners and 3 jobs to bring in the same income produced by one 40-hour-a-week job in the 1950s. In spite of soaring productivity, real wages are now a third of what they were in the 1950s. If it wasn't for corporate control of our government and the resulting trickle-down economics, ordinary workers could support their families with one job, working 2 days a week. If worker pay had kept up with executive pay, the average worker would be making $1 million a year. And the minimum wage would be $171 an hour. Now, what do you call a country in which the gap between the rich and the poor is growing beyond bounds, whose principal exports are wood pulp and scrap metal, whose principal imports are manufactured goods, and whose fastest growing industry is the construction and operation of private prisons? I think you could call it a third world country. That is the State of the Union we have inherited. In our government's drive to protect the far-flung financial interests of our multinational corporations, we have abandoned our principles and fought wars of aggression against small countries. We have overthrown popularly elected leaders and installed puppet dictators who throw out their own people, sell them out to our corporations. We have squandered the goodwill purchased by the blood of our youth in the defense of democracy in World Wars I and II. In our unilateralist arrogance, we have violated the legal framework established by our greatest generation at Nuremberg. In our phony war against the terrorists our own policies have created, we have overturned the constitutional protections given us by our founding fathers in the Bill of Rights. In our drive toward a corporate New World Order, we have sold out our workers, our families, our environment, our children's futures, and the American dream. This, too, is the State of the Union we have inherited. We've had the opportunity to create a land without want. What went wrong? Why are our workers paid such a tiny fraction of their true worth? Why are we the only major nation without a national health program? Why are our high school graduates 2 years behind their counterparts in other countries? Why are we hated by so many around the world? Why do we have hundreds of thousands of troops patrolling foreign lands and supporting foreign dictators? What's going on? The answer, I'm afraid, is that we have lost our republic. Legislators no longer represent the people who elect them, but the corporations who finance them. They answer not to their constituents, but to the lobbyists who line their pockets and fill their campaign coffers. In return, government officials have undone decades of hard-fought victories against the robber barons of the 19th century. Teddy Roosevelt, who won so many of those victories